Greetings, netizens of YouTube. It has come to my attention that the United Kingdom currently seems divided between those who are jubilant about taking our country back and those who are very gloomy about future prospects. My own personal feelings aside, it's time to look at the repercussions of the decision to withdraw from the European Union upon Britain. I'm not referring to economics, although prospects appear grim at this stage. In my view, far more serious ramifications are about to be felt as a consequence of Brexit. The Balkanisation of Britain and Europe. Balkanisation is a pejorative geopolitical term originally used to describe the process of fragmentation or division of a region or state into smaller regions or states that are often hostile or uncooperative with one another. In recent times, the term has been used in an even more negative sense, referring to ancient hatreds and bloodshed in the context of the war in the former Yugoslavia, although I disagree with this definition and the theory on which it's based. This is not the fate that awaits Great Britain, with the potential exclusion of Northern Ireland, which I will address in a moment. However, I do see some parallels with what happened in Yugoslavia and the fragmentation in the United Kingdom and Europe. What we have seen with Brexit essentially is the rejection of the power of a supranational or centralised authority, and a fresh desire for self-determination on the part of a member state, in this case the UK. On the face of it, the idea of self-determination and localism is one everybody should agree with. The principle is that decisions concerning the future of a population should be made at a local level whenever possible. The European Union, seemingly more concerned with expanding its own authority, as political bodies are wont to do, is seen as the opposite of localism. There is a democratic logic to the choice made, even though it's a kind interpretation of those that voted Brexit. This comes at a time of increasing economic and political uncertainty. There is a sense that the public understands that it's unlikely that we will see substantial increases in economic growth in the short to medium term. This is in contrast to some of the more outlandish predictions made during the dot-com boom in the late 1990s, when futurists and economic analysts were predicting unparalleled economic growth powered by the internet and the dawn of what was thought to be a true global marketplace, a bright interconnected utopian future. A decade or so later, and the grim realization is of a world beset by unemployment, static growth, and one marred by fears of terrorism, mass migration, and an increasing gap between the wealth controlled by corporations and that possessed by ordinary people. These were the conditions under which the Brexit vote was held. The United Kingdom, in international terms, is a mature country with a long history of democratic traditions. It's often said that there has never been a revolution in Britain. This type of tradition makes it well placed to resist change through an inbuilt bias for the status quo, a mild conservatism, which is felt most keenly in England. In my hangout with Captain Andy and Vivity report, I spoke about how a large part of the Brexit campaign seemed to be more of a referendum on immigration. This remains my view of the motivations of some that voted. But perhaps a more accurate description of the vote was a referendum on whether England should declare independence from the rest of the United Kingdom. I'm not saying that all those that voted Brexit are Little Englanders, although I have no doubt that some were. I am saying that the result of the vote makes the disintegration of Great Britain highly likely. The signs are already there. The First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, has already signalled her desire to push for another referendum on Scottish independence. Unlike the English, most of Scotland voted to remain in the European Union, and many Scots are deeply unhappy that vital decisions about their future are being made in England. Less than 2 years ago, Scotland voted to remain in the United Kingdom. In normal circumstances, a second vote on independence so soon after the first would seem absurd, but these are far from normal circumstances. The EU vote is of such national and international significance, it is hard to find reasons to deny Scotland the desire to vote on their own destiny, particularly if the Scottish Parliament pushes for it, or if, for example, Scottish people take to the streets demanding it. It seems highly likely that Scots will opt for independence and leave the United Kingdom in the near future. Repercussions are also being felt in Northern Ireland. The province, like Scotland, voted to remain in the European Union, only to find itself outvoted by England. More troubling is that voting largely followed sectarian lines. Most Protestants who see themselves as British voted Brexit. Most Catholics who consider themselves Irish voted to remain in the European Union. Thus, nationalist politicians who support European Union membership are utterly unimpressed at the idea of a new border being put up between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. President of Sinn Féin, the largest nationalist party in Northern Ireland, Gerry Adams, now believes that Northern Ireland should have the right to vote on self-determination. This means a potentially deeply divisive vote on whether Northern Ireland stays in the United Kingdom or whether it joins the Republic of Ireland, realising the nationalist dream of Irish reunification. It's been less than a decade since the guns fell silent in Northern Ireland, and whether the peace is held by luck, effort or circumstance, there is a possibility of a return to conflict and terrorism. At best, this means London will have to find time, amidst the economic and political fallout of Brexit, to sit down with Dublin and Stormont to prevent a damaging zero-sum scenario. Although Wales voted to leave the European Union, there is a distinct possibility that Scotland and potentially Northern Ireland leaving Britain may trigger the Welsh to consider their own referendum on independence. A parallel can be drawn with Montenegro within Yugoslavia, which did not agitate for independence, but decided to leave once all the other republics that made up Yugoslavia had gone. Like Serbia within Yugoslavia, England may be reduced to a rump state, without ever voting on its own independence. Gibraltar, a British sunspot peninsular territory some might refer to as the vestiges of the British Empire, based only metres away from Spain, voted overwhelmingly for Remain. Spain has for years asserted its claim to the territory. However, Gibraltars voted in 2002 to retain their status as part of the UK. Brexit makes life very difficult for many of the British Gibraltars living on the territory, who rely heavily on Spain for trade. Spain has now called for the UK to share control of Gibraltar. The large majority of British living on the island ensure that no radical change in status will be made. However, the British position has been fundamentally weakened concerning the Rock. The Spanish could make life very difficult for those that live on the territory. But if only it stopped there. London also comfortably voted to remain, and many are fearful of the impact Brexit will have upon London's economy. Many are also angry because of London's history and culture. They see London as an open global city that welcomes all comers and consider Brexit a vote against cosmopolitanism and tolerance. A petition has now been created, named Declare London Independent from the UK and apply to join the EU. It has received tens of thousands of signatures. In reality, there may be no question of London gaining an unprecedented independent status of capital city within a country. However, this widespread sentiment gives London Mayor Sadiq Khan the bargaining power to argue for increased autonomy and powers that will likely come at the expense of the rest of the United Kingdom. What makes the current situation so mind-boggling is just how few seem to understand that a Brexit vote would set these events in motion. I wonder whether most of the elderly English that spoke about taking their country back had the dissolution of gradualist British democracy as we know it in mind when they casted their votes. Most Brexiteers seem to want to hark back to a time of a safer, more traditional, prosperous Britain. In all likelihood, they will receive a less prosperous Britain, the dismemberment of the UK, and an increasingly bitter divide between its citizens. Life goes on, but it seems to me that we have exchanged one set of problems for an even greater set of problems.
I've got my country back. I'm not going to be here a lot longer, I'm nearly 80. But what I've got, I want to keep.